Hey guys, it's your girl Kizzy Rock, and yes, Kizzy Rock is my birth given name. Happy Sunday evening, guys. Want to say hey to all my subscribers, new as well as season. I got a quick word for you. Tap in. Well, it should be quick because your girl is tired, but we shall see. Some of you, again, every recording, of course, is never for everyone, right? But I always say that because your spirit will alert you. Most times it will be confirmation anyway, just confirmation. So some of you are experiencing or will experience a sudden halt in the process, a halt in the journey. And of course, we know halts can look like different things, seasons of stillness, seasons of delays, etc., for different reasons. But this particular halt is, it can look a number of ways. It could look like God have you stationary. This can look like job loss. This can look like, I don't know, a swollen ankle where you're stationary. You're literally stationary. Or it could look like you're disconnected from you're not disconnected from it, but you're not as intrigued about the promise as you were. And it came on suddenly. It's almost this thing where you're really turned off from it. And the only thing that's going to keep you even pressing through is knowing that you have to obey, have a willingness to obey God. But you're really turned off, like seriously, like I'm turned off. I don't even like ew, right? You're turned off from it, and it came out of nowhere. So the halt can look like a number of things. So plug in your thing, but it's just a halt. But the confusing part is that at some point you were experiencing an acceleration in the spiritual realm. Things were happening, right? You came from a delay, you came from an attack, you came from the wilderness, and then things accelerated all of a sudden. Things were moving rapidly, and it just seemed like it was so rapid that, due season was literally 1 second later. But a halt came. So what that halt is about, for some of you, again, always take everything to God. For some of you, what that halt is about, because you are so close to due season, God has to really, really get in and work on you. Why? Because if we're honest, the pursuit of destiny takes so much out of us. And if we're honest, if you go back and you look at your notes, the things that God told you to do, did you really do them? Right? Sometimes you start them and then you just kind of let it fall to the wayside because it's just taking too long and it's like, I ain't got time. So you just let certain things fall. So really you were just limping along. So the majority of your desire and your persistentness, it was in the pursuit of the journey. Even sometimes doing the thing that only God can do, or trying to do the thing that only God can do. So you burnt yourself out. So the things that God really needed you to focus on went lacking. So because the doors are so close to opening, God has helped you for different reasons. For one, He's bringing you back to focus specifically on Him. For those of you who are experiencing the turn off, it's like, if God was not even in this thing, I promise you, it would have been a done deal. Like, for those of you who are completely turned off and you can't even describe why you're so turned off from the very thing that you had such a urgency and a desire for, God is pulling you back so you can focus on God, just you and God. Meaning the promise is not going anywhere, but if God opens that door, if He didn't give you this hope, you would start idolizing whatever the promise was. You would start idolizing the promise. In fact, when you got there, the promise could pull you from God. So God he's halting you. So you might hit a delay where you have to sit there and you just got to really press in, just you and God, just you and God, just you and God. So you don't start idolizing things when you get there. Some of you are halted because, if you're honest, the pursuit of the promised land, it's already exhausting. So what happens? Many things start to fall off. These are things that God told us to work on. These are things that God had been clear about working on. And at some point, you might have picked it up and really had a desire to work on these things. But the journey alone is so it's so much entailed that you just kind of let certain things fall to the wayside, or even if you were doing them, you weren't doing them with the spirit of excellence. So let's just say God told you to start working on your mental health or start going to therapy. Well, you might have started off with therapy solid for a good 2 weeks. And then when the delays started happening and you feel like, well, I mean, nothing's moving anyway. I don't even see how, then you fall off. You fall off and then you get back involved in the pursuit of trying to open the door yourself. So the things that God told you to work on, you miss those things, or you kind of half behind it if we're honest. But God is not going to allow us to go anywhere until those things are complete. This is why it's important to pay attention to the convictions during the process so you can work on those things during the process. But we're human. We're human, but we still got to pass the test. So we got to go back, because one thing I've learned, where God has taken some of us, half behinding it, ain't going to do it. The things that you might have been one way, let's just say, before the pandemic, or you might have been one way, you had a certain mindset 10 years ago, but God tapped you and said, all right, you got to change your mindset because you got to break this generational curse, whatever. All right. So you might have been used to doing things a certain way, but you kind of just scrape it along to get by. Where you're going, it has to be a spirit of excellence. So this hope, don't get too involved in the fact that you're so turned off from it that you go and start doing something silly. Meaning, just because you don't like it, you're turned off from it, and now you feel like you can just go and just go backwards and then start, doing this and doing that. And no, remember, your commitment is to God. So even though you have no desire, you got to remember the desire had to be taken away from you in order for God to get you back on path. Again, whatever path looks like for you, it is things that God needs to work on with you to be sure that you are prepared to handle the very things that He is going to be bringing to you when the door opens. So focus on God. Focus on God. Don't backtrack. Focus on God. It's your girl, Kizzy Rock.